Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. As-salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So welcome and jazakumullah khairan to all of you for coming, and welcome to our continuation of our commentary on Kitab at-Tawheed al-Imam al-Mujaddid Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. And we have reached chapter 6, which we began last week and which we'll complete this week. And that was the chapter which the Imam entitled Babu Tafsir at-Tawheed wa Shahadati an la ilaha illallah. The explanation of the meaning of at-Tawheed and the testimony La ilaha illallah. And we said at the core of that explanation what the Imam meant or intended by the chapter was to clarify that at its core, at-Tawheed and the Shahada, the kalima of at-Tawheed, La ilaha illallah, is at its core two things. An-Nafi, negation, and that is negating everything which is exclusive to Allah, negating it from other than Allah. Wal-Ithbat, affirming all that is exclusively His to Him, primarily the worship of Allah, but not exclusively, but primarily the worship of Allah. And we saw examples of both in the examples provided by the Imam rahimahullah ta'ala. And so the Imam, what he did was he cited a collection of Islamic texts, 4 from the Quran and 1 from the Sunnah, and all of them which comprise of a nafi wal ithbat, affirming for Allah that which is His and negating it from other than Allah. And we said that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala affirms, and we said this is something which is repeated throughout the Quran. If you open the Quran and you start reading it from the beginning, from Al-Baqarah, Alif Lam Mim, and you read it into An-Nas, you're going to find repeatedly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala engages in this nafi wal-ithbat, and that's why it is said, or one of the reasons why it is said, the Quran kulluhu at-Tawheed, that the Quran is entirely a book of Tawheed, a book of establishing establishing Islamic monotheism. So the Imam, he gave 5 examples, although he could have given 500 examples of this. And the first one he gave was from Surat Al-Israh. And we said that the negation and affirmation in Surah Al-Israh comes not just in, he only cited verse 57, but it also comes, or it's actually completely becomes clear when we read both 56 and 57 together. So in that selection or that passage, it reads, and I want you to help me or remind me where the nafi is and where the ithbat is. Now remember, when we said a nafi, sometimes Allah will say, don't do this, don't do that, don't offer this to someone other than Allah. And sometimes he'll, and for the affirmation, he'll command, offer this to me and only to me, only this should be mine, etc. But sometimes what he does for the negation is he will blame, criticize, or chide the people who do something. And his affirmation is that he'll praise and extol and laud the people who do something. So the negation is not always don't, and the affirmation isn't always do. But sometimes the negation is by criticizing, and the affirmation is by what? Praising. That being said, Allah says in verses 56 to 57 of Surah Al-Israh, He says, قُلُدُ الَّذِينَ زَعَمْتُم مِّن دُونِهِ فَلَا يَمْلِكُونَ كَشْفَ الضُّرِّ عَنكُمْ وَلَا تحويلا أولئك الذين يدعون يبتغون إلى ربهم الوسيلة أيهم أقرب ويرجون رحمته ويخافون عذابه. So in the first verse 56 he said, say, O Muhammad, to them, call upon those that you claim to be deities besides Allah. فلا يملكون كشف الضر عنكم. They're unable to what? To remove the calamities and afflictions that have befallen you. Nor are they able to make those afflictions what? Transfer from you to someone to someone else. So that verse, is it affirmation or negation? قُلِ ادْعُوا الَّذِينَ زَعَمْتُم مِّن دُونِهِ. Call upon those that you what? You claim are deities besides Allah. And this, when Allah says this, He's not actually saying that they should do it. He's saying to be what? Critical. He's saying it to criticize and chide the people who do that. Za'amtum, He says, you claim. When you say somebody's claiming something, you're not praising them, you're what? You're accusing them of not being truthful. Then He said, فَلَا يَمْلِكُونَ كَشْفَ الضُّرِّ عَنْكُمْ. They're not able to what? To remove the afflictions. He's basically saying it's foolish to worship them because they lack what? The power and the ability to do anything. So is that affirmation or negation? That's negation, right? Then He says, أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ. Those that they call upon. يَبْتَغُونَ إِلَى رَبِّهِمُ الْوَسِيلَةِ. They seek from their Lord al-wasila. We said the wasila is what? The means to draw close to Him. وَيَرْجُونَ رَحْمَتَهُ. They desire His what? His mercy. وَيَخَافُونَ عَذَابَهُ. And they're afraid of His punishment. Allah is praising the people who worship Him alone. That's what? Affirmation. You guys see that? So the negation is in 56 and the affirmation is in 57. So we go to the next one, which is the verse from Surah Azuch. And that's the one where it reads, وَإِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ لِأَبِيهِ وَقَوْمِهِ إِنَّنِي بَرَاءٌ مِّمَّا تَعْبُدُونَ. And when Abraham said to his father and his people, I am free, I declare myself innocent, I disavow what you worship. Is that negation or affirmation? Negation. I'm free of it. Then he says, إِلَّا الَّذِي فَطَرَنِي. Except the one who created me. That's what? Affirmation. You guys see that? Mumtaz. All right. Then he gives the verse from Surah at-Tawbah, Surah Bara'ah. And that's where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, اتَّخَذُوا أَحْبَارَهُمْ وَرُهْبَانَهُم أَرْبَابًا مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ. And he didn't complete the ayah, but we need the tatimmat al-ayah, we need the completion of the ayah to find both the affirmation and negation. So he says, اتَّخَذُوا أَحْبَارَهُمْ وَرُهْبَانَهُم أَرْبَابًا مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ وَالْمَسِيحَ ابْنَ مَرْيَمَ وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا إِلَٰهًا وَاحِدًا. Right? So اتَّخَذُوا أَحْبَارَهُمْ وَرُهْبَانَهُم أَرْبَابًا مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ. They took their monks and their rabbis. They took the pious ones amongst them, the salihin, the righteous, and their rabbis, the learned people, the ulama, the knowledgeable people, as lords besides Allah. Is Allah praising them? Or is He actually blaming them for doing that? Blaming them. So would that be affirmation or negation? Negation. They were wrong for what? For taking them as lords besides Allah. Then He says, وَمَا أُمِرُوا. And they were not commanded. إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا إِلَٰهًا وَاحِدًا. They were not commanded except to worship one God. That's what? Affirmation. Affirming what? The Tawheed and the worship of Allah alone. Jalla Jalaluhu wa Azuma Sultanu. Then after that, he brings the ayah from Surah Al-Baqarah. And this is the verse where Allah says, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ. And this is important because it shows us that it's not just worship of Allah in terms of what? Prayer and fasting. There are other forms of worship. And one of the forms of worship Allah mentions here is al-hub, loving Allah. That's a form of worshiping Allah. There's a type of hub, a type of love that only Allah is entitled to. That hub, that level of worship, that level of love is a type of worship. And it's something which should only be offered to God, the Creator. So he says, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَتَّخِذُ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ أَنْدَادًا يُحِبُّونَهُمْ كَحُبِّ اللَّهِ. And from amongst the people are those who they take besides Allah false deities, partners, rival gods. يُحِبُّونَهُمْ كَحُبِّ اللَّهِ. They love them as they love Allah. There's something very significant about this verse. We're going to talk about this in more detail shortly. But notice Allah said they love these false deities or these rival gods, what? As they love Allah. On the same what? Plane. So if they love those false gods a lot, it means they also what? They also love Allah a lot. Okay? Pay attention to that. Because we're going to come back to that and we're going to circle back to that. But Allah isn't saying they don't love Allah and all. He's saying they love Allah, but they also love what? These false deities or these rival gods on the same what? Level. And that's where the problem came in. Because what did we say a shirk was? It's when you equate other than Allah with Allah in something which is what? Exclusive to Allah. You see that? So they put their false gods and Allah on the same plane when it came to what? Their love. Now, is this a good thing? Is Allah praising them for doing that? No, He's actually blaming them for doing that. So would that be affirmation or negation? Negation, right? That's what? La ilaha. Then He says, يُحِبُّونَهُمْ كَحُبِّ اللَّهِ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَشَدُّ حُبًّا لِلَّهِ. And those who believe, they love Allah more than anything else. That's what? Affirmation. Illallah. You guys see that? So He gave these 4 ayat, and they're just 4 examples from the Quran, but again, He could give 400, right? 400 examples from the Quran of this what? Where Allah will say, do this for me, and don't do it for others, or He'll praise the people who do it for Him only, and He'll blame the people who do it for others. Now He brings the hadith. The hadith collected by Muslim on the authority of Tariq ibn Ashyam. And that's the hadith where the Prophet said, من قال لا إله إلا الله وكفر بما يعبد من دون الله فقد حرم ماله ودمه وحسابه على الله. He said, whoever professed that there is no deity worthy of worship but Allah, and then denied everything which the people worship besides Allah. So the first part is he testified and proclaimed that there's no deity worthy of worship except Allah. That would be what? Affirmation or negation? Affirmation, right? That would be illallah. And then he what? Kafara bima yu'badu min dunillah. And he disbelieved and denied everything which is worship besides Allah. That would be what? La ilaha, right? Negation. Mumtaz. So those are the 5 examples that the Imam gave. And I gave you guys some homework. I don't know if anybody did it or not, but I'm going to give you a chance. If anybody, remember I told you guys, just in your reading, because everybody, inshallah, reads the Quran every day or reads the Quran a few times a week at least. And I said in your reading, if you look attentively and see those instances where Allah negates and affirms. Did anybody come up with any example that they'd like to share? And no pressure. If somebody's too shy, it's fine. We'll just continue. Give me an example from chapter 6. And Surah Al-An'am is a very good chapter to choose. It's chapter 6 of the Quran. Surah Al-An'am is a very good one to choose because it's known as Surah at-Tawheed, the chapter of monotheism, because it is full of what? Of Allah calling to what? His oneness. تفضل. Go ahead. You have an example?
Praise belongs to God, who created the heaven and the earth and made darkness and light, yet the disbelievers set up equals to the Lord.
Mumtaz. So the very first verse of that chapter says, Alhamdulillah alladhi khalaqa as-samawati wal-arda wa ja'ala adh-dhulumati wan-nur thumma alladhina kafaru bi rabbihim ya'dilun. Right? It says, praise be to Allah, the one who created the heavens and the earth. Allah is what? Affirming this act of worship of what? Praising Him. Why? Because He deserves it. Why does He deserve it? Because He's the one who created the heavens and the earth and everything what? Between them. ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ يَعْدِلُونَ. Then the disbelievers go and they do what? They equate other than Allah with Allah. That's what? Negation. You guys see that? Good example. Nafi wal ithbat. You're going to see many examples of this in the Quran. طيب, let's go now to Al-Masail, where the Imam begins to talk about what we benefit from the chapter that we read. So he begins those Masail by saying, وَشَرْحُ هَذِهِ التَّرْجُمَةِ مَا بَعْدَهَا مِنْ الْأَبْوَابِ. He says, the explanation of this title, the title of this chapter, is contained in the chapters that follow. So basically what he means is that I've given you this chapter and I've entitled it, Babu Tafsir at-Tawheed wa Shahadati la ilaha illallah. The chapter which explains at-Tawheed. What is at-Tawheed at its core? An-Nafi wal-Ithbat, negation and affirmation. And it also explains what? Shahadati la ilaha illallah. What does it mean to proclaim that there's no deity worthy of worship except Allah? It means that you give what Allah is entitled to only to Him. And you negate that from all others besides Him, right? And you believe in that firmly in your heart, right? He says that, but the practical way of doing that, how do we put it into practice? He says the following chapters will give that explanation. I've explained to you the meaning basically, in theory. Now I'm going to show you what? In practice with what? With the coming chapters. Then he says, وَفِيهِ أَكْبَرُ الْمَسَائِلِ وَأَهَمُّهَا وَهِيَ تَفْسِيرُ التَّوْحِيدِ وَتَفْسِيرُ الشَّهَادَةِ. He said, this chapter contains the greatest and most important issue, the explanation of a Tawheed and the explanation of the testimony of faith. And this is very important because what the Imam is saying, he's saying, man, the importance of this chapter cannot be belittled. The importance of this chapter cannot be overstated. That this is the most important issue that you're going to take from this book. Because why? This chapter and this principle that I'm giving you is explaining the most important and essential part of our religion, which is a Tawheed. It's explaining to you and simplifying it for you. And because it is explaining that to you and addressing the greatest and most important Islamic issue, it is the most important what? The most important thing you can wrap your head around. If we truly wrap our head around this, we're going to truly be able to achieve in a practical sense at-Tawheed, monotheism. And what many Muslims, and we talked about this last week, the Muslim idolaters, what many of them fail, the reason why they fail to achieve true monotheism is because they fail to understand the concept of what? An-Nafi, that there are certain things that only Allah is entitled to, and so we have to negate those things from other than Him. And in Al-Ithbat, we have to affirm those things to only Him. And when we blur those lines of distinction, and we don't fully negate or affirm, this is where we do what? We start to deviate from the path of Tawheed and fall into what? A shirk. And sometimes we do that in various degrees. Sometimes people totally worship and actually commit acts of worship and prostrate and sacrifice and give oaths to false deities. And sometimes we do it in other ways, and we're going to see that toward the end of when we start chapter 7, you're going to see some of the ways that people do it, which are what? Which are less conspicuous, which are less obvious. طيب. ثم بعد ذلك he said وبيانها بأمور واضحة منها آية الإسراء بين فيها الرد على المشركين الذين يدعون الصالحين ففيها بيان أن هذا هو الشرك الأكبر. He said, and clarifying it with clear examples, including the verse from the chapter of Al-Israh. That was the first chapter that we took in this chapter, or the first example we took in this chapter, which refutes the practice of the idolaters who invoke the righteous, saintly people. This verse clarifies that this practice is major shirk. And this is important for two reasons, or there are 2 points I want to make here. Is that we have people nowadays who are actively saying that calling upon dead people in their graves, calling upon idols, calling upon these other deities or whatever, is haram and bid'ah. It is illegal and is an innovation, but it's not shirk. Unless, and they put these like prerequisites. And these people are contradicting what Allah Himself said in the Quran. In Surah Al-Israh, in the 2 chapters we read, where He called what they were doing a shirk. They're clearly contradicting the ayah from Fatir, which we mentioned a few times in our classes, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He says, you remember ayat al-Fatir, Allah the shway. He says, وَالَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مِنْ ذَلِكُمُ اللَّهُ رَبُّكُمْ لَهُ الْمُلْكُ وَالَّذِينَ تَدْعُونَ مِنْ دُونِهِ مَا يَمْلِكُونَ مِنْ قِطْمِيرٍ إِن تَدْعُوهُمْ لَا يَسْمَعُوا دُعَاءَكُمْ وَلَوْ سَمِعُوا مَا اسْتَجَابُوا لَكُمْ وَيَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ يَكْفُرُونَ بِشِرْكِكُمْ وَمَا يُنَبِّئُكَ مِثْلُ خَبِيرٍ وَلَا يُنَبِّئُكَ مِثْلُ خَبِيرٍ. So he says that that is Allah, your Lord, lahul mulk. He's the one who owns and is the sovereign over everything. وَالَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِهِ, and those who they worship besides Allah, مَا يَمْلِكُونَ مِن قِطْمِيرٍ. They don't even own that little line in what? In a date stone, right? إِن تَدْعُوهُمْ لَا يَسْمَعُوا دُعَاءَكُمْ. If you call upon them, they won't answer your prayer. وَلَوْ سَمِعُوا, I'm saying they won't hear your prayer. وَلَوْ سَمِعُوا مَسْتَجَابُوا لَكُمْ. And even if they heard, they wouldn't be able to answer your prayer. وَيَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ يَكْفُرُونَ بِشِرْكِكُمْ. And on the day of judgment, they will disbelieve in what? In your shirk. Allah called the dua of other than Him, He called it shirk. Allah called it shirk, and they say it's not shirk. So this is important, that it's not just wrong to do it, it's not just innovation to do it, it's what? It's shirk. How is it shirk? Because when they call upon these false deities and ask them for al-wasila, a means to get close to Allah, who owns al-wasila? Who al-wasila is His exclusive property? Allah. So when you ask for it from other than Allah, you're doing what? You're equating others with other than Allah with Allah. Also, when you call upon someone, the Prophet said, ad-du'a huwa al-ibadah. Calling upon others is what? An act of worship. So when you offer this act of worship to other than Allah, you're doing what? You're equating other than Allah with Allah in something which is specific to Him, which is what? The worship of Allah, or worship. طيب, ثم بعد ذلك he said, آية البراءة مع أن التفسير الذي لا إشكال فيه طاعة العلماء والعباد في المعصية لا دعاؤهم إياهم. So now let's go back to the verse in Surah At-Tawbah or Al-Bara'ah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He scolded, He criticized the people who took their monks and rabbis as lords besides Allah. Now, how did they do that, ya ikhwan wa akhawat? How did they take their monks and rabbis as lords besides Allah? Anybody? How did that, in practice?
Because they follow whatever they say. By that following, they making them as a God.
Ahsant. They didn't what? They didn't prostrate to them. They didn't make dua to them. They didn't slaughter sacrificial animals to them. They just what? Whenever they told them to do something, even if it was the opposite of what Allah said. If they legalized what Allah prohibited, they would make it illegal. They would make it legal. And if they declared illegal what Allah made legal, they would declare it illegal. They would obey them even if it contradicted what Allah said. But even then Allah called it what? He called it shirk. Even though they weren't actually what? Prostrating to them. What does that tell us? It tells us that idolatry is not confined to these specific acts. Some people think you're only committing idolatry if what? If you pray to someone, or if you make oaths to someone, or if you sacrifice animals for someone's sake besides Allah. No, you can commit shirk in other ways, because the worship of Allah is broader than just what? Than these things. Number two, absolute obedience is not just a form of worship, but it's what? Exclusively the right of Allah. There's only one who has the right to absolutely legalize and prohibit. And when Allah absolutely legalizes something, we can't declare it prohibited. And when Allah prohibits something, we can't declare it legal. And if we obey someone who does that, then we're giving the right of absolute obedience to someone other than Allah. Number three, you don't have to know or acknowledge that you're committing shirk to be guilty of it. This is very important. Because if you remember, when the Prophet recited this verse in the presence of Adi bin Hatim, who was a Christian, he said, "Lasna na'buduhum ya Rasulullah." He said, "Oh, that's not fair. We didn't worship them." Because he's thinking worship is what? Prostrating, bowing down, slaughtering sacrificial animals. We didn't do that. So the Prophet said, "Alaysu يحلون ما حرم الله فتحلونه وتحرمون ما حل الله فتحرمونه." He said, didn't they make illegal what Allah made legal, so you made it illegal? And didn't they make illegal what didn't they make legal what Allah made illegal, so you made it legal? Didn't you obey them absolutely? He said, yes. He said, فَتِلْكَ إِبَادَتُهُمْ. He said, in that way you worship them. Notice, until the Prophet said that, he didn't realize that what? He had committed a shirk. But he had. You guys see that? He had. And so we don't have to know that we're doing it in order to be guilty of it. This is very important. This is very important because we could if we don't study. That's why we have to study and learn about at-Tawheed. Because if we don't study at-Tawheed, we could actually be committing a shirk and we don't even what? Realize it. But we'll still be what? We'll still be guilty of it. And we may be punished. We may not be excused for our ignorance. We may be excused for our ignorance and we may not be excused for our ignorance. ثم بعد ذلك, he said, the Imam, he said, وذكر سبحانه وتعالى أن هذه البراءة وهذه الموالاة هي تفسير شهادة أن لا إله إلا الله And he gave the example, وَجَعَلْهَا كَلِمَةً بَاقِيَةً فِي عَقِبِهِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ. So he said, including the statement of Al-Khalil to non-believers, I am free and disassociate myself from what you worship except the one who created me. And Allah indicated that this disavowal and this allegiance is the explanation and practical application of the testimony that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah, and what we made, and we made it the testimony of faith and what it entails of al-wala and al-bara, an enduring word that they might return in repentance. And so there's a lot there, but basically just to summarize it, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us through the example of Abraham, who is the gold standard when it comes to Tawheed. He's known as what? Al-Hanif. What does Al-Hanif mean? Basically, it means what? The gold standard in monotheism, right? That this gold standard of monotheism, Al-Hanif Ibrahim, he didn't just disassociate himself from polytheism and the idols of the idolaters. He also disassociated himself from what? From the idolaters themselves, right? And you find lots of examples of this in the Quran where he abandoned his people. He didn't just leave the idols and worship of the idols, but he left what? The people who worship them too. He disassociated, put distance between himself and them. So there's a few things there. One, believing in Tawheed and testifying to its necessities. Believing in a Tawheed and testifying to it necessitates. Loving a Tawheed, loving monotheism. And the monotheists, and despising polytheism in all of its degrees and forms, and the polytheists. This is important. So we have to love a Tawheed, love monotheism. We can't be the people who, when people start talking about Tawheed, we do this. Right? We cringe. We don't want to hear it. We want them to change the subject. Talk about anything but that. When we don't have that love for a Tawheed, that's a problem. Number two, we have to love the people of a Tawheed, the monotheists, the people who practice it. We have to love them. We have to have affinity for them. We love them because what? Because they love Allah and they love the oneness of Allah. We also have to despise polytheism in all its forms and degrees. It's sad because some Muslims, they hate what major shirk, but the minor shirk, they're like, come on, don't make a big deal out of that. You know, you're making too much mountain out of a molehill. Even if it's what? The smallest amount of shirk, we should be what? We should be against it and opposed to it. And also have to be opposed, and we have to distance ourselves from what? From the polytheists, the people who practice shirk. Because our love for things and our love for people is determined by what? By Allah's love. If Allah loves a people, we love them. And if Allah hates a people, we hate them. If He hates a thing, we hate it. If He loves a thing, we love it. Allah says that this is the example that we should follow. Abraham is the example that we should follow. All of us who say that we are monotheists, we're true lovers of God and followers and worshipers of the one true God, then we have to be followers of Abraham because he's the gold standard of that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in more than one place in the Quran tells us to follow his example. One of them is from Surah Al-Mumtahana, the 60th chapter, verse number 4, where Allah says, قَدْ كَانَتْ لَكُمْ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ فِي إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَالَّذِينَ مَعَهُ إذ قال لقومهم إنا براء منكم ومما تعبدون من دون الله كفرنا بكم وبدا بيننا وبينكم العداوة والبغضاء أبدا حتى تؤمنوا بالله وحده. In that verse, Allah says, you have an excellent example in Abraham. We're supposed to what? Follow in his footsteps. What is this example exactly? Abraham and his followers, when they said to their people, we totally disassociate ourselves from you and shun what you worship besides Allah. We reject you, and the enmity and hatred that has arisen between us and you will persist until you believe in Allah alone, until you leave a shirk. So notice, did Abraham and his followers just disassociate themselves or disavow the idols? No, the idols and the idol worships. Inna bura'a'u minkum wa mimma ta'budun. We're free of you and what you worship, not just you alone. You guys see that? Now, this is the example. This is the gold standard that we're supposed to follow. I want you to consider now how far many Muslims have deviated, how far we've gone astray from the straight path. Because many Muslims have deviated so far from Islam in its purest form, which is this what? This Tawheed that Ibrahim was upon, which has two parts to it, two elements to it. One being free from the polytheists and being free from what they worship, the idols that they worship besides Allah, right? You have many Muslims who they actually hate the monotheistic concepts or the concepts of monotheism. They refute them. They actually actively put out like videos and they write books where they're refuting the people who talk about what? At-Tawheed and the oneness of Allah, and that you can't associate partners with Allah. For example, you can't call upon the dead, you can't call upon saints, you can't seek al-wasila from people and make them an intermediary between you and Allah, etc. They try to refute the people who say that. They rail against them and they actually despise the people who call to what? To a Tawheed in its purest form. They themselves may do what? They may practice idolatry in various what? Forms. You can't hate something if you what? If you actively practice it. They actively practice and engage in idolatry in some form or another. And we're going to talk about one of the forms that's very common and kind of inconspicuous. And they'll even do what? They'll defend these practices. And we talked about this a few moments ago where there's some people, some celebrity imams who actually have videos where they're actually defending the people who go to these graves and these shrines and they worship the people therein. They say they're not really committing shirk unless what? Unless they believe that these people are actually God or have God-like powers, right? So they make excuses for them. And they actually have an affinity for people who associate partners with Allah. They might have more love for the Jews and Christians and for the pagans, the Hindus, than they actually have for what? Actual Muslims. And so when we see this, brothers, it's telling you and sisters, it's showing us what? How far the Muslims have deviated from the path of Allah. That we find that sometimes we have the greatest hatred for the people who worship Allah alone, the monotheists, and the greatest love and affinity for the people who worship other than Allah. We have to really check ourselves, take a step back. Who are the people I associate with? Who are the people who, when I have the option to have lunch with someone, I prefer to have lunch with them? Who are the people who I have a choice to invite them to my home? Who are the people I'm inviting to my home, I'm hanging out with, I'm choosing to call and tell my problems to? You guys see that? We have to think about that. Who are the people I defend? When they do something wrong, I defend them. And who are the people, when they do something wrong, I what? I bury them. I berate them. I can't find an excuse for them, and so on and so forth. We have to really think about that and look at that and what it tells us about where we are in terms of our Tawheed. Because the Tawheed is not just worshiping Allah, but it's also disavowing the worship of other than Allah and those things which are worshipped besides Allah and the people who worship those things besides Allah. ثم بعد ذلك, he commented on, or he mentioned, or he referred to, or referenced the verse from Surah Al-Baqarah which talks about the loving of Allah. And remember, we said we're going to revisit that. Now remember, he said, يُحِبُّونَهُمْ كَحُبِّ اللَّهِ. They love their andad, they love their rival gods on the same level as their love for Allah. Which means what? They love Allah a lot. So they love Allah. Loving Allah, is that a virtue? It's definitely a virtue. We have to love Allah. In fact, it's an essential of faith. But their love for Allah, even though they had great love, immense love for Allah, it didn't enter them into Islam. It didn't make them Muslims. Why not? Why didn't it make them Muslims? Allah says, يُحِبُّونَهُمْ كَحُبِّ اللَّهِ. They love Allah. He's admitting that they love Allah. Why did that love of Allah make them Muslims?
Equation.
Because what? They also love their false gods on the same what? Level. What were they supposed to do? Love Allah and deny the false deities and the things that they were allowed to love, like their spouses and their children. They can love them, but not love them what? On the same plane. They can't equate those two loves, right? You guys see that? Now, if this is the case, a person will not be a Muslim if they love something other than Allah on the same plane with Allah. What about the person who loved something more than Allah? What about the person who loved something and didn't love Allah at all? You guys see that? If a person could love Allah and still not be successful, what about the person who didn't love Allah at all? You guys see that? طيب. ثم بعد ذلك, last but not least, he mentioned the hadith of Tariq ibn Ashyam, and that one's important too, because he said at the end, he talked about the what the person would gain, what they stood to achieve if they did the first part. He said, haruma damuhu wa maluhu. his life and his property, his wealth, will become sacred, sacrosanct. It will be inviolable. Nobody could touch it. And if they touched it, it would be a crime in the sight of Allah. وَحِسَابُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ. And the one who will bring him to account is only who? Allah. He's supposed to be what? Left alone, and not a hair should be removed from what? From his head. No harm should come to him at all. This is what the Prophet said. How does a person get that? How does a person get that status? He said, Man qala la ilaha illallah. The person who pronounces the testimony of faith, there's no deity worthy of worship except Allah, Muhammad is the Messenger of Allah. Wa kafara bima yu'ba min dunillah. And he disbelieved and shunned everything that is worship besides Allah. Now the Imam, he says, notice, the Prophet didn't give this status to the one who just said the kalima. It wasn't enough to just what? Say it. He had to do more than that. It wasn't even enough to what? To know it. To know it and believe it in your heart. He said it wasn't even enough to what? To worship Allah. But he had to also what? Disbelieve in what was worshipped besides Allah. He had to go a step further. This is important for us, ya ikhwan, because we have Muslims who, when it comes to other faiths, they're agnostic. We're agnostic when it comes to people of other faiths. A person will say, what do you think about the Jews and Christians? Right? I'm not talking about my neighbor who's a Christian. I say, yeah, Paul, he's going to hell. I don't have the right to say that. But somebody says, what do you think about the Jews and Christians? Are they upon truth or falsehood? Are they going to heaven or hell? And a person says, I don't know. I'm not sure. I can't say that their faith is wrong. I can't say that they're going to hell. Right? I can't say all Muslims are going to heaven. You have Muslims who actually will say that. Right? They're Muslims. They pray, they fast, they read Quran, they fast Ramadan, etc. They pray. They might even pray at night. But they don't disbelieve in what is worship besides Allah. They're agnostic. We'll have to see. We'll meet Allah and then we'll see. Allah will sort it out, we'll know. No, we know because what? Our faith tells us, Man qala la ilaha illallah. The one who believes in Islam. The oneness of Allah. Wa kafara bima yu'ba min dunillah. He has to also what? Disbelieve and believe that it's wrong. Anything besides what? Worshipping Allah alone. As Allah says in the Quran, وَمَن يَبْتَغِ غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا فَلَن يُقْبَلَ مِنْهُ. Whoever follows a religion other than Islam will never be what? Never be accepted by him. He said, Inna dina inda Allahi al-Islam. Right? The only religion that's acceptable to Allah is what? Al-Islam. You have to believe that, right? So what the Prophet is teaching us here in this hadith is we have to believe without question that worshipping Allah without partners is absolutely required of every living creature with free will. Everybody has to practice this Tawheed and follow this Islam. Everybody. We have to pronounce this belief openly. We have to be willing to what? Nashhad. I testify, I proclaim. I'm not hiding my faith. I'm openly proclaiming it. We have to put that belief into practice. We can't say we're Muslims and then not practice Islam. And we also have to disavow and distance ourselves from everyone and everything that contradicts what we believe in. We have to say what? These people are what? They're wrong and they're upon falsehood. We don't have to go to their, knock on their door. I have to go home right now, knock on my door and say, Paul, you're going to hell. Have a good day. No, but we have to what? We have to believe that. We have to believe that what they're upon, if they don't change their ways, they're upon falsehood and they're under the threat of Allah's punishment. Will Allah punish Paul? I don't know. Has enough knowledge come to Paul that he should know better and he should be doing better? That's between him and Allah.
Yeah, cannot
but
judge unseen.
Exactly. But the faith itself, there's a difference between, as we say in Arabic, an-naw wal-ayn. Right? The faith itself, that path is a false path. But the individual, that's between him and Allah. طيب. So now we come to the next chapter, chapter number 7. And the Imam Mujaddid, this is a very important chapter which we will kind of introduce it, but we won't delve into it because I don't want to give you guys a brain overload. But we're going to take a very important principle that governs this chapter and other subsequent chapters, that if we master this, it will help us to be able to identify a shirk. It's almost like it's not a flashlight. It's almost like let me think of an example. It's almost like a mine detector, right? A metal detector, right? That you can use, right? Right? It's almost like that. It's something that will help you to identify clearly a shirk. If we master this principle, it becomes a means for us to what? To identify shirk as what it is, to recognize it, and to be able to what? To avoid it, therefore. So he says, the Imam, he says in this chapter, he says, Babu min al-shirk lubsul halqati wal khayti wa nahwihima li raf' al-bala' aw daf'i. He says, Babu min al-shirk, chapter. It is from a shirk to wear a ring or twine to relieve an affliction or prevent its occurrence. That's basically the meaning of the words. Now let's go through them in detail so we can understand what the Imam is saying. He says, Babu min al-shirk, chapter, it is from a shirk. It is from idolatry. It is from polytheism. It is from the violation and undermining of at-Tawheed. And when he says a shirk, he left it open-ended. It could be minor. It could be major. It could be minor. Right? It depends. Depends on what, as we're going to see. Depends on the i'tiqad, the belief of the one who wears it. It depends on the belief. What do they believe? Based upon what they believe will determine if what? They're committing major or minor shirk. You guys see that? So what is the Imam telling us right away? This thing that I'm going to talk about is not a light matter. Although many Muslims think it's light matter. Right? What is he talking about? And I want my daughter to pay attention to this because we had a conversation about this a couple days ago. He says it is from shirk. It's not a light matter. It's something which will undermine a tawheed. And it could be major or minor shirk depending. What is this that could be shirk? Lubsul halqati wal khayti wa nahwihima. Wearing a ring or twine. Something that you wrap around your forearm or wrap around your bicep, wrap around your leg or your ankle, right? Now, he mentioned two things. And then he said, wa nahwihima. He said a ring or twine. Then he said, or something like this, which tells you it's not just a ring or twine, but anything what? Along those lines. So this is an example, not what? Not a specific or exclusive list. These are the only two things. But no, these are examples. Which means that a person might wear what? A type of bracelet. They might wear what? A necklace. They might wear a necklace with what? With an amulet. They might carry in their pocket a rabbit's foot. They might wear lucky socks. And they do it with the same purpose. You guys see that? What's that purpose? He said, لِرَفْعِ الْبَلَاءِ أَوْ دَفْعِ. To relieve an affliction. A person has some type of affliction. A person, for example, they have a nervous condition. They have anxiety. They have
like a seizure or something.
Seizure. They have an equilibrium issue. They have a certain fear of certain things, right? So they have some type of affliction, or they could have a sickness. They could have like an illness, like for example, like eczema or some type of like growth on their skin, or they may have some like internal illness of some sort, right? Some type of affliction. So they wear this ring or twine or something along those lines to relieve that affliction which has befallen them, or to prevent the affliction from befalling them in the first place. You see that? So a person says, my brother, when he turned 16, he started having like real bad stomach pains and he couldn't eat anything. And everybody in my family said it must be the evil eye, right? Somebody gave you the evil eye. So to protect you, wear this, and that way you won't be afflicted. It will prevent the affliction. So either a person has the affliction already and they want to remove it, or they want to prevent it. So notice when you put the whole tarjum or the whole title together, you can understand what the Imam is saying. He's saying that this is from a shirk. But is it from a shirk absolutely? Is it every time you see a man with a ring, you say, oh, you're committing shirk. You see a woman with a bracelet, you're committing shirk. You see a woman with a necklace, you say you're committing shirk. Is that how it works? No, it's only if you do it with what? With this intention. He said, so when is it shirk? If you wear it with that intention, that you believe that this thing can relieve an affliction, or it can what? Prevent one. You guys see that? So a person might wear a bracelet for fashion. That wouldn't be shirk. A person might wear a bracelet because it was a gift and it makes them feel close to the one who gave them the gift. You guys see that? A woman might wear a ring to show that she's taken. You guys see that? None of those reasons would be shirk. But if they wore a ring because they believed it could protect them from an affliction, they wore a necklace because they believed it could prevent an affliction, that would make it fall into what? A shirk. You see what the Imam is saying? And it could be shirk akbar if they believe that this amulet or this charm can what? Can protect them istiqlalan, independent of Allah's will. Whether Allah wills it or not, if I wear this, I'm going to be protected. That would be what? Major shirk. If they believe that I wear this and it will protect me by Allah's will, but they have no proof for that, it would be what? Minor shirk. But it would still be what? Shirk. And this is why the Imam says min shirk. If you wear it with this intention, I'm going to be protected from harm. Or I've been harmed and I want to be relieved of this harm. If you wear it with this belief, that's what? Shirk. Is it major or minor? Depends on specifically what you believe. Do you believe it can do it by itself? That's what? Major shirk. No, it does it by Allah's will. It's what? Minor shirk. But it's still what? Still shirk. You guys see that? Mumtaz. Tayyib. So now this brings us to an important principle that I told you. If we have this principle, it's like what? It's like that metal detector. How do I know if it's shirk? Because you got people in Muslim communities who what? Who wear a necklace that has what? An eyeball at the end of it. They'll wear a bracelet that has what? An eyeball. I'm like, that's kind of weird. It actually looks like, I don't know, it's like scary almost. Looks like something out of a horror movie, right? You're like, man, why are you wearing that? It's kind of weird, right? And the person says, this will what? Protect me from the evil eye. Protect me from disease. Protect me from calamities, etc. They actually believe it will protect them, okay? So it's important for us when we see things like this to have this metal detector. Shirk, 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 shirk. We can recognize it and what? And avoid it. And teach our kids to be able to recognize what? A shirk. So what is this detector? What is this principle that is that metal detector or that shirk detector, right? It's the principle known as qa'idat al-Asbab, the principle of causes. So causes, brothers and sisters, believed to produce certain effects or outcomes or means to certain ends are two types in Islam. If you master these principles, you'll be able to what? Recognize shirk. So basically, in our religion, there are two types of causes, two types of asbab. The first one is asbab haqiqiyah, those real and substantiated causes. They're real, genuine, substantiated causes that produce certain effects, certain outcomes, certain means to ends. They're substantiated, that's haqiqiyah. But you also have asbab wahmiyah. You have causes or means to ends which are imagined or unsubstantiated. They're not substantiated. There's no basis or proof or evidence to indicate that they're what? They're really a cause that can produce the effect that people believe they produce. So how do we distinguish between al-haqiqiyya, the real, genuine, substantiated ones, and the ones which are unsubstantiated? Every cause which its causality or causation is unconfirmed, we consider it what? Wahmi. We consider it unsubstantiated, unconfirmed. For example, somebody says, I wear this amulet, this evil eye amulet. Girls, pay attention to this. This is very important, okay? Because we talked about this the other day, right? So now, I wear this evil eye. I have a bracelet with that little eye at the end of it, right? And somebody says, okay, why do you wear that? I say that it can protect you from harm, protect you from the evil eye, for example. So now I've just done what? I've created a cause and effect relationship between this bracelet and what? And the evil eye or calamities. You guys see that? Now this cause and effect relationship, is it substantiated? There's nothing to support it. So therefore we would call that sabab wahmi. We would call it unsubstantiated, unconfirmed, because there's no evidence. Rabbit's foot, right? I dig in my pocket to get some change and I pull out, you see I have a rabbit's foot. Like, what do you have that for? I'm like, it gives me good luck, right? So I just did what? I created a cause and effect relationship between the rabbit's foot and what? And good fortune. You guys see that? So now, if I can't substantiate that, we call that sabab wahmi. We call it unsubstantiated, unconfirmed, unconfirmed cause or means. Another example, for example, in Saudi Arabia, when I was there, they were talking a lot about how some parents would take like a necklace or something, and at the end of it, they would put like the skin of a wolf. And people would ask, why do you put this necklace with the wolf skin around your child's neck? And they would say, because it protects from al-jinn. That the jinn, they're afraid of wolves, and they're afraid of, so the skin of the wolf will what? Will run the jinn away. Again, exactly. So what? The person is creating a cause and effect relationship between what? The skin of the wolf around a child's neck and what? And the actual what? Repelling of the jinn. If they can't substantiate it, we call that sababun wahmi, right? We call it imagined or unsubstantiated cause. We call it an unsubstantiated or imagined cause. Now, how do we substantiate? There are two ways in our religion that we substantiate causality or causation. The first one is a shara, credible Islamic sources. Somebody says, look, this evil eye bracelet can protect you. I say, okay, substantiate, confirm that. One way they can confirm it is what? They could show me in the Quran. They could show me what? In the hadith. They could show me by the ijma' of the scholars, right? The scholars are agreed that this is what? This has causality. It has this effect. You guys see that? So what's the first way we can confirm? Shara, the credible Islamic sources, right? The law, the deen. See that? For example, ar-ruqya. You guys know what ruqya? Ruqya are these prayers that we've been given in certain surahs that we say, in certain formulas that the Prophet taught us, that if we say them, they can be a form of healing, right? Ruqya. Is it a confirmed means for curing and healing?
Yes.
It's confirmed. How's it confirmed? By the shara, by the text, right? What about al-hijama, bloodletting, cupping? Is that a confirmed means of curing certain diseases and treating certain illnesses? Absolutely. How is it confirmed? A shara. You guys see that? Another example, Zamzam water. Is it effective? Does it have causation? Absolutely. How do we know? A shara. The deen taught us, right? Honey. Honey, does it have causation? Can it cure certain diseases, particularly stomach what? Stomach diseases? Yes. The Prophet what? He told us. In fact, a man came and he said, my brother has what? Has some stomach problems. He has stomach pain. The Prophet said, give him honey. So he gave him honey and he came back and he said, I gave him honey and he still has stomach problems. So the Prophet said, give him honey. So he gave him honey again. And he came back and he said, I gave him honey, he still has stomach problems. He said, give him honey. So the third time I think he came and he said, I gave him honey and he's still sick. He said, Allah is the truth and your brother's stomach is lying. So he gave him honey again and he got better, right? Al-Muhim, honey what? Has this causation. We know it because what? The deen, the shara, right? Tayyib, what about black seed? Black seed, does it have causation? Is it a healer? Yes, absolutely, because why? The Prophet said that the only thing it can't cure is death. You guys see that? Tayyib. So these are examples of cause and effect or causation established by what? A shara. The second way that we can establish causality or causation is a tajriba. Trials, clinical trials, successful experimentation, or just practical experience. But there are two prerequisites for this. Somebody says, we tried the wolf skin and it works, right? We tried it through what? We believe in it because of what? A tajriba. We say, there's two prerequisites in order for us to accept it. This causation or cause and effect relationship. Number one, there has to be what? A connection between the cause and the effect, the means and the end. There has to be what? A connection, right? There has to be a connection. That's because why? No one can create a cause and effect or produce an effect or bring about an outcome without a connection between the cause and the effect, except who? Allah. Allah is the only one, as he says, إِنَّمَا أَمْرُهُ إِذَا أَرَادَ شَيْئًا أَن يَقُولَ لَهُ كُن فَيَكُونُ. He is the one who his affair is that whenever he wants something to happen, he just says what? Be and it is. He doesn't need to touch the things that he creates what? An outcome in. He just says what? Be and it is. But me, if I wanted to go out that door and that door was closed and I wanted to open it, could I stand there and go and make it open? Abadan. I have to what? I have to push the door. I have to put my hand. So when you see the door open, you see also what? The connection between the cause and what? And the effect. You guys see that? And so one thing when a person says it's a cause and effect relationship, if it's not established by the Sharia, if we don't have evidence from the Quran and Hadith, and a person says there is connection, there is causation, and they say it's causation because of trial and error, we say we need to see what? We need to see the connection. We need to see the connection. You can't tell me that this evil eye bracelet can make you better, and I can't what? I can't see the connection between this and what? The affliction that is trying to what? Repel or to remove. The second condition is that this causation or this connection, it has to be perceptible. It has to be something I can perceive the cause and effect relationship between the means and the end. It has to be what? It has to be perceptible. And it could be perceptible by everybody, right? It could be perceptible by everybody. So for example, does drinking cold water or cool water, no, I'm going to say cold because there's, physicians will tell you don't drink cold water because our cells can't what? Can't absorb cold water. We should drink room temperature. So I don't want to get into those semantics, right? But if you drink, let's say cool water, does it quench your thirst? Okay, does it quench your thirst? So the effect, so the effect between cool water and the quenching of thirst is something which everybody perceives. Everybody perceives that. That's perceptible to everyone. I'm hungry. I eat. My hunger gets relieved. The connection between eating food and no longer being hungry, that connection is something we all what? We all perceive. Another example, I have a sore knee. I take an ice pack and I put it on there. And I sit it on there and about 5, 7, 10 minutes later, what? It's not sore anymore, right? The connection between the ice and the soreness of the knee and its relief is something that's perceptible by what? Everybody perceives it. You guys see that? Tayyib. But there's also some causations or the connection between the cause and effect. It's only perceived by what? The specialists. But they still perceive it. It's not something that nobody perceives. Nobody can perceive it, nobody can explain it. Because when we start to open the door to say there's some things that there's a connection, we just can't explain it, that opens the door to what? Shirk. This evil eye, evil eye amulet and the wolf's skin. There's a connection, just can't explain it. That's how you open the door to shirk. The way we close the door is we say that we have to perceive the connection. If either everybody can perceive it, or at least the experts can perceive it. For example, they have these new virtual remote security systems. A person could leave their home, drive 30 minutes to work, and realize, I think I left my door unlocked. And could do what? Could punch a few buttons on their phone and lock their door at home. You guys see that? A person is locking their door and they're 30 minutes drive away from their home. That connection is not something that's perceived by everybody, but it's perceived by what?
Expert.
By the experts, the specialists, the people who what? Who know and create this technology. You guys see that? So if there's a connection between the cause and effect, and that connection is perceptible, we say that what? We accept that cause. But if there's no connection, or the connection is not, it's imperceptible, we reject it and we count it from what? A shirk. So if a person comes with a bracelet with an eye on it, a deer's eye or whatever eye they put on it, and says that this will protect me from the evil eye, protect me from stomach illnesses, protect me from, the machinations and plotting and planning of what? Of evil actors, right? Then we say, number one, ithbit, right? Confirm this, right? Confirm this with what? The shara. Person says, I don't have any dalil from the Quran and Sunnah. So, okay. Do you have what? Any trials? Any tajriba? He says, oh yeah, people in my family have been doing this for years. I said, no. In order for us to accept a tajriba, there's two conditions. First condition is what? Connection. Give me a straight line connection between this bracelet and repelling the evil eye or preventing stomach illnesses or preventing the machinations of evil actors. And number two, if you say there's a connection, that connection has to be what? Has to be perceptible. Either perceptible by what? By everybody? Or perceptible by what? The experts. If you can't pass this litmus test, then what you're doing is considered shirk. What is it called, Huda? What would it be considered? Shirk, right? So explain to me why the evil eye bracelet would be shirk. Explain to me why. In your own words. Why would it be shirk? Evil eye bracelet. They're creating a cause and effect relationship between something, and they can't what? Substantiate it. They can't substantiate it not with what? The shara. They don't have any text to support it. And they can't substantiate it with what? A tajriba. With trials, clinical tests, right? And even if they claim, hey, we've been doing this for years in my family, all right? And nobody ever gets sick and this, that, and the third, we say what? You have to show me the connection. The connection has to be what? Perceptible. And if it's not perceptible, we automatically put it in the category of what? A shirk. Like mumtaz. All right. Let me give you some examples. And you guys tell me the ruling and why. A person says, knock on wood. Knock on wood, huh? Shirk. And also, it doesn't have to be something you wear. This is important. This principle is applicable to what? Superstitions too. You guys, because all those things have what in common? Creating a cause and effect relationship. Do this and you'll get this result. It'll bring about this outcome. You guys see that? So knock on wood, right? Will protect what? It will protect
whatever you're talking about from happening.
Exactly. Ahsant. So knock on wood would be what? Shirk. Because you're creating a cause and effect relationship that you can't substantiate. You guys see that? Mumtaz, give me salt over the shoulder. Shirk. Why? Cause and effect relationship between what? Between one thing and another thing, and you can't substantiate it. You can't substantiate it with what the shara, you can't substantiate it with tajriba. You guys see that? Another example. Person says, if you walk under a ladder, that's what? That's bad luck, I think they say. Walk on the ladder is bad luck. So cause and effect relationship between walking on the ladder and what? Good and bad fortune. What do you say? Shirk? Because you're creating a cause and effect relationship that you can't substantiate. You can't substantiate not with the shara, not with the law or the teachings, and not with what? With tajriba, trials. I'll give you another example. Person wears a charm or an amulet, right? And it has some like weird design or something like that. I say, wow, that's funky. That's different, man. That's weird. Where'd you get that from? What's that about? So I wear it for what? For protection, right? For protection from, I don't know, from weakness or old age or arthritis or whatever. Then what? We'd say what? Shirk. Because not confirmed by the Sharia, and no what? No connection that we can perceive, no perceptible connection. And so with this meter, ya ikhwan and wakhawat, with this meter, we can distinguish between at-Tawheed and shirk. And we can distinguish between many of the things that many people do, Muslims, that they think are just okay. It's part of tradition, part of culture, or they actually think it's part of Islam and it's actually what? A shirk. If we have this understanding, if we wrap our heads around this principle of causes, Asbab, then we can identify a shirk and avoid it. And with that, we'll stop because I don't want to give you guys overload. And then next week, we're actually going to take the what? The text that he gives to support this chapter, and also the fawaid or the masail associated with it. Any questions, comments, or critiques, Shaykh Juan, for today's session? Any questions? Tafadhal, Shaykh.
Wrong practice overseas. Sapphires.
Blue sapphires. Tell me about blue sapphires.
Blue sapphires, they have a palm and the eye, and blue sapphires inside.
Yeah?
Yes, that's to protect against
Against the evil eye.
Yes, sir. And they have rings too.
Ring is the same way.
And so there's one practice, and the other practice to protect the house from the evil eye.
Uh-huh.
They put the horseshoe.
Subhanallah. And that's even here in America, they do horseshoes for good luck.
Yes.
And you have to put the horseshoe
Yes.
pointing up because they believe if you put it upside down, the luck will run out. Go ahead, Afi.
They sacrifice an animal and bring blood on their palms and they put it on the wall of the house.
Subhanallah.
They put two spots on the right and the left.
Wow. So what do you guys think? Person slaughters an animal, dips his hand in the blood of the slaughtered animal, and like he said, puts it on one wall, on the right wall with the right hand, left wall with the left hand. What would that be? Why would it be shirk? The person says, you say, man, what are these handprints for? He says, oh, I'm blessing my house before we move in, protecting from the jinn or whatever. You're going to ask him immediately, Ethbit, confirm this. Confirm it from the Sharia. Confirm it from Tajribah. If he says, I can't confirm it from the Sharia, but what, our people been doing this for years, and it's always worked, as in his mind it always worked. He say, okay, then what? If it's tajribah, then we need to what? We need to see the connection between a sabab wal musabbab, between the cause and the effect. And we also, that connection that you establish has to be what? Perceptible. Show me, how can I perceive that you really are being protected or whatever, or what's happening going on? If we can't check those boxes, it should. Go ahead, Akhi.
Another practice, they have a dough, bread dough.
Mm-hmm.
They put it on the door of the house.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like dough, like you would make like bread with, but they put red coloring in it or
No,
something.
I mean, yes, just regularly. I mean, they put it on the door of the house.
Wow.
So this is to protect against the evil.
To protect against the evil eye. Yes,
Another
upon you.
one is just this, I don't know if you have seen it or not. I have seen it from some people. They have the amulet under their armpit.
Mm.
They keep it all the time.
Hey.
You know, if they put it away, they will not be protected.
Wow. Now, these are Muslims doing this.
Yes.
So how does that happen? How do we go from being an ummah of Tawheed to an ummah that practices these things to the point that he's saying back home, and he's not saying like, well, there's one guy. He's saying back home they do it means lots of people do this. It's very common. It's a common practice. What that tells you, ikhwan and akhawat, is that when people are not actively studying their religion and educating themselves about their deen, over time, what happens? The shaitan starts to what? Whisper to them and tell them things. And they don't have the knowledge to what? To refute the shaitan or to just dismiss what the shaitan is saying or reject it. And they start to what? To adopt these things. And over time, they become the religion and take the place of the actual religion. And that's why this is so important, ya ikhwan. This class is not about numbers. There's blessing in whoever comes, if it's just one person. But the fact that we don't come for these types of classes, and this is not just here, it's around the world. When there's someone teaching at-Tawheed and the concept of monotheism, most Muslims believe we know this. We got this. We don't need to study that. And they're the same ones putting dough on their doors and blood handprints on their walls and wearing an amulet under their arms and thinking what? I know at-Tawheed. I've mastered Tawheed. I don't need to learn anything about Tawheed. You guys see that? And so this is why this is so important. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make all of us see the importance of it, the Muslims, and to learn it, whether we're learning it here or learning it from other sources, but we have to learn it. We have to protect ourselves from committing a shirk, because a Muslim can fail in lots of areas and still be successful in the hereafter. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hey.
Have been that the group, when they're making dhikr, they have to connect with the heart of the sheikh, because he's closer to Allah.
Subhanallah.
So you have to focus in that they got in group, they're making dhikr.
Hey.
So they have to focus on the heart of the sheikh. So because the sheikh is closer to Allah.
Subhanallah.
There's so many practices, I can't tell you.
And so it just tells you. And so we can make a lot of mistakes in a lot of areas, and we do. We're human, we make mistakes. But those mistakes can and inshallah will be forgiven. But the mistakes in the Tawheed are not likely to be forgiven. And we saw examples of that previously. So this is the area where if we're going to be good and we're going to be masters of it and be proficient in it, this is where we need to be really proficient. And with that, brothers and sisters, we'll bring anyone. Muhammad, tafadhal, Shaykh.
Brother Ansari, we have one question here.
Okay, I got one, the in person, and I'll take your question, inshallah ta'ala. Go ahead, Muhammad. Yes. Hey. Yeah, now again, if there's clinical trials that show that copper can minimize the effects of arthritis or mitigate it or minimize the pain from arthritis, and there's clinical tests to show that there is some benefit in it, we'll accept it. Why? Because we said if you can check those boxes, either the shut up, the teachings tell us that, or there are what? There's tajriba, there's clinical trials and experts who can what? Who basically know that they've researched and seen the connection between this and some type of illness, or curing or mitigating some type of illness. We'll accept it. But if a person, for example, wore that, and they didn't wear it for arthritis, they wore it because, as we're going to see, they believe that it protects you from weakness generally. That there's some type of illness that makes your muscles weak, makes you generally weak, and if you put this copper around your forearm, it will keep you strong. Well, now that's not something that the doctors are saying or clinical trials are saying. It's something that what people are saying based upon their traditions and the culture, the customs, and it's something they've imagined, something that they've made up. It's unsubstantiated, so we have to reject that and consider what? From a shirk. Tayyib, Sister Zahida, go ahead with the clubhouse question.
The question says, can we wear surah from the Quran or name of Allah and the amulet around the neck? And I think the second part of it was for the evil eye.
Tayyib, there's a chapter that we're going to come to where the Imam talks about amulets from the Quran. The one thing that we can say without question is that an amulet from the Quran, or an amulet which is, for example, has the names of Allah or a name of Allah, it will not be shirk, because you cannot associate Allah with Allah. You cannot associate Allah with Allah. So the amulets from the Quran, the one thing the scholars have not said traditionally is that it is shirk, but they have differed as to whether or not it is a bid'ah, it is an innovation or not. And some of them have allowed it. As early as the companions themselves, they used to debate this issue. Some of them have allowed it, and some of them have disallowed it. So there's a legitimate difference of opinion regarding it. But what I will say is that even if there's difference of opinion regarding it, it was not from the Prophet's practice to wear the Quran Wasn't from the Prophet's practice to write the Quran on the walls of the masajid, or to have the Quran written on parchment and hang it in his home. And so the way that the Prophet ﷺ used the Quran to prevent the evil eye was not by wearing it or hanging it. It was by what? Reading it and studying it and using it as a ruqyah. Using it as a ruqyah where he would read certain chapters of the Quran or verses of the Quran into his hands and blow into them. And so what we want to be aware of, one, and we want to avoid, two, is using the Quran in a way other than the way the Prophet used it, and abandoning the way that the Prophet actually what? Used it. So rather than reading it, we do what? We wear it. It's like almost like we want to take the easy way out. And this easy way that we're taking may not have what? The same efficacy, the same effect, if any effect. Because if it were effective, why wouldn't the Prophet ﷺ do it himself? Why would he do it himself? And the companions themselves, they debated it, not because they saw the Prophet doing it sometimes and not doing it other times. They debated it because why? Because it is the Quran. Because it is the words of Allah. That's why they debated it. But we have no indication that the Prophet himself did it or taught it to others. And so therefore, if we want to use the Quran as a way to protect us, which it is a means of protection, and the Quran tells us that, and the Sunnah tells us that, we should protect ourselves using the Quran in the same way that the Prophet did, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.
But you see that what happens is that they put the necklace to boys,
Mm-hmm.
to men.
Yeah.
Let them grow up with the.
Yeah, which is whole nother layer, right? Another layer,
practice.
whole nother layer.
It's a lot there.
Yeah, no question. Any other questions, comments, or contributions before we go? Okay.
Clubhouse.
All right. So with that, brothers and sisters, we'll bring today's session to a close. Again, thank you all for coming. Please spread the word and let people know that, again, this is the most important thing that any Muslim can study. And we're studying it every week. And we invite and encourage everyone to join us. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.